Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will be discussing something a little bit different, which is Giovanni's Ring, which is by Giovanni Rocco, which is a pseudonym, and a co-author, Douglas Schofield. And this is kind of half memoir, half true crime, the story of an undercover police officer who infiltrated the Decavalcante family, part of the Bambino crime families, those are real crime families, that, as you can see here, it's stated that the Sopranos seem like they were based off of. So, like I said, this is not quite the normal kind of thing that I typically would read. This one actually, I got, the publisher reached out to me and asked if I would like a copy of this to review, and so I, of course, obliged. If you're going to send me a book, I'm like, sure, send me a book. I will read it. And a very nice book. This is just like, it felt like it came like it was printed and then immediately handed to me. That's the way that this came. But I'm also always open to try something new. This is a pretty short book and also just a genre that I've not really read a whole lot. I watched a lot of TV shows with that kind of thing. I've actually never seen The Sopranos, I do have to admit. I feel like I should watch it after this, but I have not seen it. I know there's a new movie coming out too. I haven't even seen the show. I didn't have the channel. That's my excuse. But anyway, this was a shorter book, something new. I've been trying to, expand my horizons a little bit, because though fantasy is always going to be primarily what I read because it's my favorite, it's good to try other things. And I really did enjoy this book. It kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start. We start with, which completely made sense, a scene that's kind of showing much further in the future when Giovanni is already infiltrated and there's kind of like a very dangerous situation that he's in. But then we kind of go back, talk about his childhood, and then do kind of the more memoir pieces here. It's pretty relevant because a lot of it talking about the childhood is how he grew up in kind of the bad neighborhoods in New Jersey. He knew a lot of people in biker gangs, people in other gangs, people that were part of one mob family or another, and that was kind of what he grew up in. And especially when he was younger, hung out with pretty bad crowds and kind of just learned the ways of the street. And then later ended up actually becoming a police officer, even though he really didn't think that was what he was going to do for the most part, even though his father was a very respected police officer. And then we kind of go over through time to him actually infiltrating the crime family little by little and get an interesting look at kind of what the training is like to an extent. Some of it's kind of vague, which it's kind of noted that they don't want to actually go into super minute details about how people are trained to be undercover. But we get some details about kind of how the undercover training works, and we get to see a lot of interactions with different members of the crime family and different people in general. So a few things I will say. Like I said, this starts a little bit slow because it starts reading more of a memoir, and it kind of varies throughout, where you get the true crime feel where we're going through and having these interactions. A lot of it does turn back to talking about the author's life and experiences there. I didn't really mind that, but early on as we were going, there were a lot of times where you would all of a sudden say, by this time I'd already been divorced, and well, you never mentioned you were married, nor that you had kids, and there were a lot of details that were kind of left out because I think they were trying to toe the line between we want to do a memoir kind of to an extent, explain how everything got here, but we also want to move on. So there were definitely some moments there, or just times where if this wasn't, a true story, I would say plot conveniences, where it's like, oh man, I was in trouble, but luckily, and then it would mention somebody who just hadn't been mentioned before. Once again, this is like I said, this is not this is a nonfiction book. This is not based on the true story. This is somebody actually telling their story as it happened, and so it's not that it's that way. I think it's more so done that way for dramatic effect. And I think that's where this comes to it being different for me, because normally when you have that in a fiction book, it's really, you just happen to have the thing. Here, I think it's more dramatic because it's true, it's just saying what happened, but it hits you a little bit differently when you're not as used to the genre. So there were some things like that, or some things that seemed almost conflicting, where there was like I said, talked about the whole hanging out with a bad crowd that time, and then later becoming a police officer, even though it didn't seem like that's where he was going. But then later in the book, there's a story about the first time he saw his father like in action when he was young and wanted to be a police officer. And so some things like that just seemed a little inconsistent with the storytelling. I think once again, I think that probably comes from the co-author more so, or maybe it's just anecdotes as told. But it's trying to fit it into a narrative way. Sometimes it did feel a little bit jumbled. Once we really get going, though, I quite enjoyed this and really enjoyed the interactions. You did get some of the comparisons to Sopranos and then the obligatory, but this ain't like TV show, this is real life kind of comments that you definitely expect. And a lot of what's going to happen, once again, even though this is nonfiction, a lot of what's going to happen, you can kind of see it coming. And like the way it ended, I definitely could see that that's what was going to happen. It just kind of seemed to fit the story. And so it's an interesting experience when I'm reading something I did not know anything about this. One really surprising thing is this was quite recent. Like the events that were happening, or I think like some of the stuff at the end happens in like 2015, which feels really, really recent. And you'd kind of think about it being older, I guess. I kept having to remind myself when he referenced the date. I'm like, that's right, this is not that long ago, which was interesting. But I mean, it still is. It's like from a lot of the mob TV shows, movies, things, and just storytelling in general, because this is still being presented in a narrative fashion. I could definitely see where things were going, but I actually really, really enjoyed the ending. I knew how it was going to end up. It's just one of those things you could tell. But it was done really well. There was a lot of emotion put into it, especially toward the end, is where I really thought that it came out. Where a lot of it seemed like it was kind of more devoid of emotion to an extent. Not like horribly like monotone, but just it's somebody talking about basically getting into the persona of being this terrible guy, being what's the last name in the book he used? He goes with Giovanni Gatto. I can't believe I forgot that for a second. So he's becoming Giovanni Gatto. And that's the symbolism of Giovanni's ring. The title is he had like a mobster type style ring he would wear when he was in character, and he'd take it off when he went home. So that was kind of the recurring thing. Is we get not only his struggles with actually infiltrating the mob, but his struggles dealing with the red tape that goes with being a police officer that's working with the FBI and other agencies and undercover and handlers, and also all of the strain that put on his family when he has to be gone, or he has to be really careful that he's not seen. Because the other thing here is the person here actually lived very near in their personal life to the places they were being undercover for extended periods. So it was kind of interesting to see there some of the commentary looking too at how you definitely get some not necessarily the most sound decisions made, or how you get bureaucracy gets in the way of what makes the most sense. And so you get some of that as well. And once again, with today we have so many different like police shows, mob shows, things like that. So a lot of it feels familiar, and so you feel like you're almost reading something that you know here. So like I said, once we got going, this was, I thought, a very interesting read, and I enjoyed kind of seeing the interactions and seeing the breakdown of just different kinds of people. Also of the author talking about how he slowly realized people saw him in character, and just some of the other little nuances there. It was a really interesting story, which granted obviously helps. And like I said, tying it into his own life, adding that emotional impact, especially the further you get in, I thought made this a very successful story. So this, I thought, was really interesting. One other fun thing I have to mention, because it made me laugh, I was looking this book up when that publisher first reached out to me on Goodreads, and I was just curious to see more about what it was, because I had not heard of it at the time before they reached out. And I looked at a couple of the reviews, and there were a couple of negative reviews that specifically said, it was so hard to keep track of all the names they threw out of the mobsters. And I just laughed. I mean, like, man, I read fantasy. You want to complain to me about too many names to keep track of? Really? There were not that many names. And as a fantasy reader, I found it very easy to keep track of who was who. It was not difficult for me. So it just made me laugh. I guess maybe there were a lot of names when you're talking about all kinds of different mobsters and people, but I had no trouble keeping track of it. So I guess maybe this was a good book for me as a fantasy reader because I didn't have that problem. But honestly, overall, like I said, this was an interesting story. I think if you like true crime type thing or like police shows, mom shows, that sort of thing, this would probably be a good one for you. Like I said, definitely not the normal kind of thing that I read, but I found this to be an enjoyable book, and I actually liked it a lot more than I thought I would, to be honest. I ended up going with 4 stars on this, which I did not think I was going to do, especially having this be a book completely out of my comfort zone and completely different. I was surprised I ended up there because I was pretty sure it was going to be a 3-star book most of the way through, or I guess not most of the way through, but as it started out. Like I said, it did start a little bit slow, and it was well written and I was enjoying it, but it just hadn't pushed me over the top. But as we kind of wrap the story in and we really get to everything all coming to a head, it was just handled so well. Like I said, just the emotions, the real feelings, the real people involved, showing everything combining from like once again from like his personal life, his professional life, the mob, the FBI, the police, everybody all kind of combining together. Everything just ended so well, and actually really stuck the landing for this one for me. So I saw a couple of the other reviews said that it was boring, and I'm just like, it had its slow parts, but this is also a very short book and very quick to get through. So, I mean, once again, I'm used to reading books much longer and quite slow sometimes. So maybe that's just me, but I thought it kept pace well enough. It was definitely the kind of book where each chapter, as it ends, is kind of leading into the next one. And it had a really nice balance between going through specific situations and kind of the smaller moments that just made it feel more real and really kind of showed where it was going. There were a few very small lines that were like almost more anecdotal, but they just did a lot to really show you who the person writing the book is, and also just kind of show you really the interactions and once again make it feel more real, and like these people aren't just caricatures that are done up for the book to basically make it seem more interesting. So this was a book I really liked. And I definitely, like I said, recommend it if that's any of that sounded interesting to you, or if you like this kind of thing, or read like true crime kind of like books like this. I definitely would recommend this one. I have not really read any others, so I don't know how this compares. But for a first one, it worked pretty well for me. And like I said, I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. And so I definitely think it would be one to check out. But those are my thoughts on Giovanni's Ring, the story of Giovanni Rocco, the undercover agent who infiltrated the mob that The Sopranos may or may not be based off of. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Check the link in the description for a link to the Wizardly Duo Discord if you want to chat books, or really anything at all. Once again, even this isn't the normal kind of book I talk about, but hey, we can chat about that or anything. We'd love to have you. It's always a lot of fun there at the Discord, so check it out if you're interested. And of course, if you'd like to see more of my content, make sure to subscribe.